Thanks everyone for joining our discussion today on business adaptation and resilience in the time of COVID-19. My name is Ryan Daly and I lead marketing efforts for our sustainability group here at Nsf. I'll be running logistics for our discussion today. I encourage you to please submit your comments and questions during the presentation, and if time allows, we'll address those at the end. Alternatively, we'll follow up with you afterwards. And finally, a recording of this discussion will be distributed afterwards. To kick things off, I'd like to have a quick poll on what everyone has seen in their business operations following the COVID-19 outbreak and the impacts it may have had. That'll help guide our panel discussion and hopefully provide some insights that mirror what you're seeing for your personal operations. So I'll give that just a couple more seconds to wrap up. And it looks like a majority are seeing their business is down, but some alternative viewpoints. So hopefully we'll have an opportunity to cover all of those. All right. Before I introduce our panelists, I want to give a really quick introduction to Nsf International for those who are not familiar. Nsf is an independent, not-for-profit, non-government public health and safety organization. In the last few weeks, we've helped manufacturers switching production to medical device supplies, including ventilators and hand sanitizers. Pharma and biotech companies develop and obtain approval for COVID-19 related medicines and testing devices. Food retailers and manufacturers assess COVID-19 related risks to their customers, employees, and supply chains, as well as sustainability professionals evolve from this crisis and prepare for a more sustainable future. Now, a quick introduction of the panelists. They'll have a chance to talk a bit more about themselves and what they do shortly, so I won't take up too much of our time now introducing them. But our panel consists of Alyssa Hartman, Executive Director at the Artisan Grain Collaborative, Jill Brockman-Cummings, Senior Manager and Head Miller at Janie's Mill, Rebecca Hamilton, Collaborative Executive Officer at Badger Balm, Andy Trindle-Mersch, Director of Coffee and Sustainability, Senior Manager Business Development for Sustainability here at Nsf. Nova is going to serve as our moderator today. And with that, Nova, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Ryan, so much. How's my audio?
Sounds great, Nova.
Super. Welcome, everyone. I just wanted to take a couple of minutes to set the context for our panel and share with you that this idea was born out of a desire that I had to bring some inspirational and helpful learning opportunity information to the companies that I've been working with and the companies that Nsf serves during this very stressful time. And one of the interesting things that I've been observing as I've been reaching out and having interviews and discussions with companies all across the value chain is that during this crisis, we are of course experiencing disruption in many painful and stressful ways, but we're also finding opportunity inside of the crisis. This disruption during the pandemic has exposed weaknesses, but also strengths on a global scale. And so today we're going to focus on the strengths. The crisis, for example, has shown us how quickly nature can recover when human activity and pollution declines. And we put a couple of pictures on the slide here of some of the great examples of that around the world. Within just weeks, we've seen that waterways and air have been visibly cleaner in cities all around the world. And also more animal and plant life has begun to appear in places that are under lockdown. The crisis has also shown us that our social norms can shift very quickly as employees adapt to working from home, as I'm sure many of us are today. We're swapping our commutes and all of those flights we might have been taking before to engage online so that we can spend more time with our families and communities. These signs show how the disruption offers us an opportunity to make some positive changes that might have seemed too drastic or even impossible before. And observing these signs, we're seeing that leaders around the world are also calling on business to be more responsible. Next slide, please. And to serve all of a company's stakeholders and to be really participating in the recovery from this crisis. Here we've shown just a few examples of leaders from government, business, NGOs around the world, asking that companies be mindful of serving all stakeholders, their employees, their customers, their suppliers, the communities where they operate, and the natural world that we all depend on. They're calling for business to help ensure that we emerge from this pandemic more resilient than before and better able to handle future crises that we also see on the horizon, such as climate change, for example. Next slide. Interestingly, consumers are also echoing this call for responsible business, and we're sharing several survey findings on the screen here today. This is people just like you and me who've been surveyed, and especially Americans are demonstrating and saying that they expect business to be a force for good now, to improve society and the environment. They want companies to demonstrate purpose beyond just making products and profits. In fact, in a recent survey just a few weeks ago, nearly half of US consumers said that this pandemic has made them more concerned about the impact of their purchases on the environment. So the opportunity to recover more responsible, stronger than before, and more resilient in the face of crises like this is especially true in food and consumer products. That's where many of you listening in today work. Food has become front page news right now. Producing, distributing, and obtaining it is one of the most essential activities that's allowed during lockdown everywhere around the world. And although it's true that many parts of our food system are stressed, especially restaurants, meat and dairy producers, and grocery, it's pretty amazing that the system is still serving our basic needs. Government grants and loans have helped, but I think the real credit goes to individuals inside these companies and many others who are committed to adapt and innovate during this crisis. So the goal of this webinar is to learn from these individuals and their stories, to support them, but also perhaps to model similar tactics inside of our own businesses. So today we're going to hear from a regional food and farming organization, a national personal care brand, and a restaurant chain about the changes that their businesses have made during this pandemic and how they're building resilience. You've seen their bios online, so I'm just going to welcome them. And first, I'd like to welcome Alyssa Hartman. She's the Executive Director at the Artisan Grain Collaborative, and Jill Brockman-Cummings, the Senior Mill Manager at Janie's Mill, and they're going to tell us about their partnership in the Neighbor Loaves program.
Hi, Nova and all. Can you hear me okay?
Great.
Awesome. I'm Alyssa. I'm the Executive Director of the Artisan Grain Collaborative, and we are a network of folks in the Upper Midwest, primarily centered in Illinois, Wisconsin, and Minnesota, working collectively to build a regional regenerative grain shed in the Upper Midwest. And what that means for us is that we are connecting folks working throughout the supply chain, farmers, millers, maltsters, bakers, chefs, brewers, and distillers, to ensure that farmers have the ability to grow a more diverse rotation of grains, including lots of small grains, things like wheat, barley, spelt, others, and to sell those products within the community to local food businesses. And we also do a lot of work on promoting and building awareness about the importance of small grains in a crop rotation and how people in community can get those products into their hands. So that's a bit of background about what we do normally, and I'm excited to talk more with you all about a program that we have launched since the start of the COVID pandemic called Neighbor Loaves, which is connecting farms, mills, and bakeries with food pantries and the emergency feeding system to ensure that sustainably produced grain continues moving off of farms, through mills, through bakeries, and gets to people who need that food during this time of COVID. I'll pass it over to you, Jill, to add some more.
Okay, so this is Jill, and Janie's Farm is a certified organic 5th generation farm in East Central Illinois, run by Harold, Sandy, and Ross Wilkin. And Janie's Mill is a natural extension of Janie's Farm. And just a couple miles down from the farmstead, I stone grind hybrid, heritage, and ancient grains into high quality flours and other products. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about what helped the mill adapt quickly during the pandemic was that we have a very short supply chain. Our tagline is farm to mill to you. So Janie's farm to Janie's mill to consumers. So adapting to this disruption was simply a matter of becoming more efficient. And we already had built some partnerships with organic farmers and formed relationships with Alyssa and the rest of the Artisan Grain Collaborative to build a stronger grain chain in the grain shed. And so partnering to provide flour and grain to bakeries participating in the Neighbor Loaf program was an honor. And it also helped us here at the farm and mill because we were able to supply bakers with our grain and flour to provide the Neighbor Loaves, which Alyssa can go into more detail on. Go ahead, Alyssa.
Great, thank you, Jill. And thank you, Alyssa, for the amazing work that you're doing in building a regional grain shed that was perhaps at risk of being lost. And now I'd like to welcome Andy Trindle-Mersch. She's the Director of Coffee and Sustainability at Phil's Coffee, and she's going to explain how their cafes around the country have adapted to serve customers during lockdown.
Good morning, everyone. Am I able to be heard well? Great. Just always want to make sure before you start launching in. Just a very quick background, Phil's Coffee, we are largely a retail coffee shop chain. Of course, we have some food as well. We have 60 retail stores around the country, the bulk of them in California, but also some in Chicago and in the DC metro area. More than 85% of our revenue previously came from our stores, our retail store channel. We also, though, had a robust wholesale business with a big bulk of that actually going to offices. We also have some limited grocery outlets. I think you can imagine what some of the disruptions have been, given that we are largely retail coffee shop based business and also even a large part of our wholesale going to offices. Both of those businesses plummeted very quickly and very immediately with shelter in place mandates. We also closed our stores at our own decision right ahead of that decision by the state of California because we were concerned about the safety for our customers and our team members as well. However, our major innovation has been in opening our stores more quickly than a lot of other folks have done through a contactless format. And we now have 55 of our stores open in this contactless format. We've been testing this with very careful safety protocols to protect our team and our customers visiting the store. And this has been just a phenomenal help to our team by giving us faster opportunity to regrow revenue for the company as well as for the store. And also our customers really love Phil's. And so we get a lot of really wonderful feedback on thank you for figuring out how to do this for us in a way that we can enjoy our coffee that is safe. Very quick high level on what the contactless store is. It's simply nobody can walk in the store. You have to only pre-order your coffee and lighter food menu on our mobile app, no exchange of cash or credit cards on site. And there's a lot of, you can imagine a lot of hand sanitizing, masks wearing, everybody is fully protected and nobody can enter the store at all. We moved to this very quickly. We had shut down quick and early, and then we very quickly pivoted to figuring out how to safely open in this new format. And it's been a great increase. Some of our stores are already up to, believe it or not, 100% of revenue, not only a very select few in some very neighborhood locations, but on average, we have over 50% business recovery, sales revenue recovery through our contactless store format. So that was a very quick pivot. We're also a little bit more midterm. We are quickly, much more quickly than I've seen us do before, looking at some new product channels and new product ideas. So we are working hard and fast to come up with new ways to generate revenue and to safely sell through our stores, which is our primary source. And I'm happy to, if there's more questions around, I think we'll get it more details when we get to some of the questions, but that's just kind of the high level of who we are and where we're at in this process.
Yeah, that's amazing to hear that you were able to bring revenue up that quickly at some of those stores. And yeah,
Isn't that?
We'll get into some of the details in our discussion in just a few minutes, but now I'd like to welcome Rebecca Hamilton, and she's the Collaborative Executive Officer at Badger Mom, to share how they're focusing their business on essentials, both in products and in their communities.
Thanks, Nova. Is this okay with the volume?
Great.
Thank you. So Badger is a family-owned and operated personal care, cosmetic, and over-the-counter drug company. We manufacture out in Gilsum, New Hampshire. We have about 100 employees, and we make about 50% of our products right now is sunscreen, and then we have a whole range of other personal care products, really focused on the natural and organic realm. And so when this happened, there was quite a few things that happened all at once that we had to make shifts to adapt to this. So first and foremost, we had to redesign our business. We're a manufacturing facility. We had to overnight, of course, like many other businesses, shift half of our workforce to working remotely. And then the half that we're still working on site, splitting them into separate shifts, figuring out what we needed for social distancing, and just the whole range of different things that was required in order for us to be able to make the environment safe for our employees. And I think on the having half the workforce at home, this is something we've recently been considering and thinking about as an option. And so this was an interesting jumpstart into seeing how that works and figuring out how to do it effectively. On the communication side, we were already moving in a direction where we're seeing a fall off on brick and mortar sales and an increase in online, and this also really catapulted that forward and has completely changed everything from how we're communicating on social media to where we're positioning our products so that it's still accessible. We saw this kind of shift from outdoor and gift toward grocery and essentials. And with that, I think that, well, when New Hampshire shut down, which is where our manufacturing is, we were deemed essential because we manufacture over-the-counter drugs and products that are sold at grocery. It really gave us a pause to think about our entire product line. We have over 100 different unique products, and to consider which ones do we feel are actually essential and which ones are not. And so we actually went through every single product and then prioritized the ones that we felt were truly essential, and just made a decision that those are the ones we would focus our resources on, and potentially even go out of stock of other ones if need be, to be able to really have a business that's creating essential products. And then we repurposed some of our marketing budget that was earmarked for travel toward creating a fund that we could use to support our local community, because we recognize that when the state shut down, well, we were given the opportunity to continue manufacturing as an essential business because so many others weren't. And because of everything that was going on with the pandemic, there was, a much greater need in the community. And so we're able to donate money to organizations like Feeding Tiny Tummies that support getting food for young children in the community. And then we also actively reached out to frontline workers to be able to offer them what I think is one of our most important products right now, which is our original product, the Badger Healing Balm, which is originally created for dry crack chapped hands, which I think is something that a lot of people are really struggling with right now with all of the hand washing and hand sanitizing. And so we were able to give quite a bit of that out to local hospitals and grocery workers and community members that were needing to be out on the front lines. And then the last thing I would just mention is that kind of going forward in this process of looking at our current line and looking at refocusing our manufacturing on the products that are more essential, we also re-envisioned future product launches. And so we've kind of have a more simplified approach going forward in terms of what we want to be launching, and thinking about really what products are needed and how can we focus our manufacturing efforts on that.
Very impressive array of changes that you've made across the whole company. But I think it's interesting that while on one hand you've been focusing, sort of streamlining the product mix and concentrating on manufacturing so you can meet demand, at the same time you're expanding distribution to customers in new ways. And that's a theme that came out in many of your stories. So thank you all for sharing the highlights with us. And now I want to get into a discussion, and I'd like to talk more detail about how you made these changes, what it took in terms of process, structure, partnerships. How were you able to adapt quickly and make these changes in the business? And then we'll talk a bit about the impact they're having. So first, I think let's start with Andy and share, how did you shift, for example, to that contactless ordering, and how did you streamline and ensure product could get to those retail outlets so that they could maintain revenue at that level you described?
Yeah, great. And I wanted to encourage all the other panelists to pop up their videos now too. I didn't want to hog the screen alone here.
Okay.
Yeah, there we go. Thank you. So Phil's moved, and this goes to our executive leadership, our C-suite team. I feel like they were very quick to react and be aggressive and proactive about how to preserve our business. So I'm personally very grateful to them for that. We generally have a culture of agility and adaptability, which we just capitalized right into. We have always operated fairly lean, with people having multiple skill sets and digging their hands and fingers into things that are not always directly their skill set or experience. So we sort of had that as a baseline of our talent pool. Very specifically, we immediately, every leader was called and told we were to focus on essential work only, and to clearly go through that list with each of our team members, and to go through that list with our upstream boss. Just what is your essential work? That is what you need to be working on. And that was very helpful. I started it first with my team too. Immediately, I went to daily team meetings, because we were now remote work versus in-store work. So daily connection to kind of keep reviewing, what is the essential work? Are we working on the right things? How do we stall and postpone things that are non-essential? That was also employed across the company. So our C team meets twice a day, actually. So 2 meetings, morning and afternoon, every day, to sort of go through where the business is at. I'm part of the supply chain group. We also have a daily team meeting with all the other supply chain leaders. So lots of constant connection and quick decisions. We've also a way to approach new opportunities and preservation opportunities is we formed multiple cross-functional teams. So in addition to just sort of tightening it up within our teams, there are multiple cross-functional teams that have from C-level down to kind of the lowest level admin support staff available, cross-functional of levels and also departments and functions. And it's been very effective. So for example, there's a team that met, which was not when I was on, which is how do we best capture revenue at the store. And it was a cross-functional group to figure out how to safely open our stores. Then that's why we were able to execute on that so quickly, because we put the right efficient people in the room to discuss and problem solve. We also had a group that I did serve on, which is our Fails bean bag business. How do we sell more beans through our online channel? And even once our stores open, how do we do that so that we recapture revenue? Also, we have another one, new revenue channels and new revenue streams, and a smaller task force. What are new revenue opportunities that are out there for us as a company? So just really specific targeted task forces to work on things. We were also quite painfully, but I think very wisely aggressive with aggressive furloughs and team reduction hours across the admin portion of our company. So over 50 to 60% of our admin staff, so that's home office folks like me, are temporarily furloughed and or on reduced hours in order to help preserve cash immediately and to ensure that we are ready to react and recover very quickly. So these are some of the ways in that we very quickly put together new ideas, and through these different task force and groups, we successfully did open up our contactless stores that are doing, as I said before, anywhere from 50% on average to a couple of stores doing 100% of pre-existing store sales. We have our online sales grew over 500%, and we worked through how to manage that at the roasting plant, and we're working on new revenue streams and getting pretty far along with new products that we might be launching soon as well. So those are some of the things that we have done very quickly to improve revenue.
Interesting. I think we're going to hear, based on my earlier conversations with you, some similar tactics that others have been using. And so I think I'll turn to Jill and Alyssa to talk about how you were able to adapt and come up with this Neighbor Loaves program. And I guess I would say, when we spoke earlier, all of the pre-work that you had done on building relationships among the different players in what could emerge as a regional grain shed would be quite interesting. Yeah.
Sure, I'll get started if that's okay, Jill. So this concept in particular, as we had a little practice call yesterday, and I told all these folks that this was totally a shower idea where many good ideas are born. I was just thinking back in March about all this work that we have done, building relationships throughout our local grain shed, and how we could engage those to support businesses throughout the pandemic and to ensure that grain kept getting to people who need it. And at the early kind of mid-March, when we were starting to see shortages of bread in grocery stores, I knew that that meant that food pantries were not having adequate access to those products because they often depend on access from retailers to fill their shelves for their clientele. And so I just had this idea, what if we could figure out a way to pay local bakers to produce bread made with local grain that would then end up with food pantries. And it's definitely a system that is built upon existing trust with organizations and businesses throughout our region. I was able to call people and say, hey, I have an idea. Will you try putting this on your online store and see what happens? And I was hopeful to get an official count tabulated before this call, and I didn't have a chance to, but I'm fairly certain in 6 weeks' time, we're very close to having sold 7,000 loaves of bread that have been made with local grain and have been baked and delivered to people who need that food right now. And, it's been interesting because I think in some ways this program wouldn't have been possible in a normal situation. The urgency that the pandemic created really allowed us to leverage this moment, not only to make sure people have food access, but also to continue educating the public about what local grain is and the fact that it is part of a regional food system and a product that can be accessed and can be accessible to everyone. So it's kind of a funny cocktail of only being possible because of existing relationships, but absolutely needing to build new relationships really quickly as well. And people are, I have found, very willing to think outside the box or in ways that might have not been possible in February because of the way our whole system has shifted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Jill, what do you have to add to that? I think you're still muted, Jill. I can't hear you anyway.
Save your pearls of wisdom so we can hear them.
I was just saying, I'm sorry about that. I was just saying that I wanted to commend Alyssa on her brilliant idea, because it was just, I just thought it was the most perfect thing that she came up with at this time to provide good food to people when they need it the most. So partnering with the Artisan Grain Collaborative on this project has been really fulfilling. One of the bakers that uses 100% of our Glen wheat is Eric at Muddy Fork Bakery in Bloomington, Indiana. And I checked in with him a couple weeks ago about the neighbor loaves, and he gave me some numbers, and that was 2 weeks ago. He said he had received 532 orders and delivered 439 loaves to Mother Hubbard's Cupboard, which is a food pantry in the Bloomington, Indiana area. And so he's providing this very nutritious, delicious bread to people when they need it the most. He's supporting us by buying our Glen wheat. And he's also been able to hire one full-time baker who is out of a job to bake these neighbor loaves. So that's just an example. Alyssa had asked me early on in this project for names of bakers that use our wheat and our flour, and it just seemed like the bakers were so excited about the program, and they've gotten so much support from community members who donate, you know, to the Neighbor Loaves program. So it's just been really great, and I appreciate working with Alyssa on this, and I just think it's wonderful. And that's one of the partnerships that we've been working on. Harold Wilkin, who is the farmer and owner of the mill, he just naturally builds partnerships and relationships naturally. That's just because who he is, with other farmers and other millers in around the country, but in our region specifically. So when this pandemic started, we continued to reach out to organic farmers and purchase organic grain as we needed it, because our online sales went up 5,000% from where they were pre-COVID. So we've been milling around the clock, whereas before we were milling maybe 8 hours a day. So we have 2 mills milling now around the clock. We had to hire a lot more people, and at the same time make sure that our safety protocols were in place, since we were bringing other community members in the school area into the mill. We want to make sure everyone was safe, not only for our mill workers, but for the consumers. So we had to adapt and change. But back to the partnership, we've helped other small mills also by supplying them with grain, because Janie's farm still has a lot of grain in the grain bins from last year. So we are able to supply other millers with wheat, with rye. At the same time, we have plenty, so there's no shortages here at Janie's mill. So those are just some of the relationships and the partnerships that we had, but we're continuing to build, and we're real happy with that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting having an organization like Artisan Grain Collaborative in the region already, and as you said, Alyssa, just, you know, people being, because of the disruption, being more open to trying something new in a very rapid timeline seem like two really critical ingredients there. Rebecca,
Nova, can I jump in super quick, because I was really remiss to forget one key part of our strategy, which was our suppliers and who have been really wonderful across the board. We went out very fast. And in fact, I spent like weeks of my time on this, and I can't believe I forgot to credit them with allowing us to roll coffee contracts, offering us extended payment terms, gifting us some services. We've had a lot of rent abatement support. So we also went with relationships. You two brought it out for me by talking about relationships. So I feel embarrassed that I forgot that. And I want to thank, all of Phil's suppliers and my coffee suppliers in particular, who have just been excellent partners for us. And those are through long-term relationships that we've had. So thank you. Sorry to jump back in there, Rebecca.
Yeah, let's have a discussion. Rebecca, would you like to add? I know we talked about the fact that you also had kind of a steering committee that you could call on and a lot of relationships in the community.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, before I get into our internal structure, I want to echo what Andy said, and just that right now there are a lot of shortages in supply chains, and I've found that for Badger, and I think probably the other organizations on this call, it hasn't been as much of an issue because we focused on developing long-term, close, short supply chains where we have a relationship. And so when things get tough, we weather it together, and that goes both ways. Whoever is able to give a little does. And I think that's critical, whether it's a pandemic, climate change, whatever it might be. That's one of the most important things we can do in being able to be resilient. So just wanted to add that in before saying anything else. In terms of our internal structure, we were really lucky in that, so my title is the Collaborative Executive Officer, and that's because we have a little bit of a different structure at Badger. I do run the company directly with my sister, so we're co-CEOs, but we also have a strategic leadership team, and that team has been critical in being able to implement all of the changes that we made in our business quickly. And that's because when we went to having half the staff work remotely, to having 2 separate shifts that never ever connect, to having 3 pods within the shift so that we never have more than 10 people in a space at a time. So there was all these different things that require leadership that's segmented. And so having that strategy team allowed us to divvy up the responsibilities throughout the company. My sister and I are each on 1 shift, and so we never see each other, but we're there as kind of leadership in the company, along with 2 of our other strategy team members are there on site. We each take different roles. We're able to really move things forward quickly because there's a shared responsibility. And we also meet quite regularly as a team to look at everything from how can we shift around our capacity. For example, when we said that we shifted towards more essential products, what that also means is that there are certain teams that have less work and certain teams that have more work because there's just a complete shift in what our business model looks like. And so we've actually had to look at, what is the work responsibility? Is there team sharing that we can do? Can we cross-train people and have them work on a place where there's maybe a little bit too much work there and they have capacity? And so there's been a lot of shifting around to try and fill the gaps so that we could keep everyone on staff and be able to kind of move forward. And again, well, we've certainly seen a drop off on our core products, on our sunscreens, we've been able to adapt. And some of the things that we're doing to adapt include taking on contract manufacturing for products that are more needed than some of our other products. So it's just shifting around what we're using, but using the resources that we have. And so there's a lot of different things that we've done, but having that strategic leadership team has helped us to facilitate all those changes smoothly.
Great. There's a couple of other things I heard both Andy and Rebecca mention as well as, so you've got this cross-functional leadership team that meets probably on a very regular basis to contend with, meeting demand, keeping employees employed and busy right now, but also a bit of innovation going on. Andy, you alluded to that you've got a team that's also looking at where are the new opportunities, and it sounds like that's happening for you, Rebecca. And so Is there anything more you'd like to share about that? And Alyssa and Jill, if this brings up any thoughts for you that you'd like to share, I think that's really interesting that that's going on during a really stressful time.
Yeah, I don't have anything I can announce yet, but because we haven't officially, but in the past we've been very, very retail centric with all of our innovation, and that's because that's where our CEO and founder's heart is, in his community and at our stores. And then some of us who are in coffee and who just want to buy more beans and sell more beans and help build out a very large capacity at our roasting plant. That there's been other channels we wanted to explore for different products that we could move through direct to consumer sales and or through grocery store shelves. So shelf stable products, RTD products, things like that. And we are now actively, diligently exploring and getting very close to launching on some new products. So that's what I'm personally very excited about that, because I always felt we had great opportunity there. The more coffee we sell, by the way, the more I can do some of the great upstream responsible supply chain work that I believe we're involved in at the coffee farm level. So the more coffee I sell, the better for those channels.
Yeah, I mean, I think on our end, what I would say is that, well, I would never wish to have a pandemic. It's a really terrible thing that we're all experiencing. Having a crisis forces you into a type of creativity that you might not otherwise have. And I will admit there is a part of me that thrives on crisis, because all norms are out the window and all of a sudden everything is a possibility. And there's something really exciting about that, because you get stuck in how business is or was or could be, and making massive changes is hard and it takes a while. And when you get something like this, all of a sudden everyone is willing to look at possibilities that are not what our norm is for our business. And so I think that the businesses who are going to be most successful coming through this are the ones that are able to completely wipe the slate and rebuild their business. And maybe you take back a lot of the things that you had before, but you have to also be willing to really take a hard look at what is not going to work in the immediate future or even the long-term future, and be willing to just completely pivot. So we do have some exciting projects that we're working on and innovation, not all of which I can share, but I think it's definitely been an interesting process, and we've made a lot of changes in our business very quickly, for better or for worse.
That's really the
Better.
discussion was to recognize that a lot of us are feeling that and observing that in our work and in our personal lives, and to share that and make sure that we come out better, faster, stronger, and more responsible as a result. And I guess I would also invite Alyssa and Jill to talk about that, because the Neighbor Loaves project right now is intended to provide food to food pantries, leveraging all of these micro and small businesses in the region that could become a fully functioning regional grain shed in the future. And so I'm just wondering if you see a pathway for this to continue, even if you're not supplying bread to pantries, but in other ways.
Yeah, this pandemic has been a very interesting experience for folks working in local and regional grain systems. As probably many people have read headlines about a lack of flour access and people not being able to get grain. As Jill said, Janie's mill, Janie's farm, they have a ton of grain. We don't have a grain shortage on the local and regional level in the way that appears to have been the case for national or global food supply chains. And so it's been a really interesting experience to have lots of consumers take a peek at some of the places that exist to buy grain locally, much of which is organic or sustainably produced. These are folks who maybe just didn't even know there was an opportunity to purchase these products locally, but because they couldn't get what they normally do in the places they normally do, people have taken a bit of extra time to find where they can buy these products. And so small mills throughout the country, Janie's Mill certainly being one of them, have really stepped up to the plate to fill the need for grain and flour among the baking public. So many of us calming our nerves right now, needing bread. And that has resulted in a really interesting spike in business for a lot of small grain-based companies right now, which I think is a pretty different experience than many other businesses across the food and other industries. It's just been really intriguing to watch. And I will just say the folks who are doing best right now are those that already had a way to get their product directly to a consumer. As folks are probably reading across food supply chains, if you are a meat producer or really any kind of an agricultural producer and don't have the appropriate infrastructure in place to access your end user, this is not an easy time. But for those who do, they're really filling a need. And what we're all kind of asking ourselves now is, how do we retain some of these new clients that have been awakened to the presence of a local or regional grain system? How do we keep them ordering and baking and brewing beer with local grain into the future?
Yeah, we're seeing that. I'm seeing as I read the industry news, a shift towards more local and regional sourcing for risk management, and we're also seeing that shift at the consumer, at the level of all of us as eaters. So again, because of the disruption, becoming aware of opportunities to work and live in a new way, and there are some indications from surveys that more localized purchasing will continue. Once you've subscribed to a CSA box or what have you, and you come to enjoy that, it'll be a part of your routine. So. Okay, I think what I want to do, we've had a great discussion. Just in the last minute here, I want to ask about, let's talk about impact. So if each of you could highlight some of the silver linings that you've seen in terms of beneficial impact to employees, to suppliers, to community organizations, and to the environment as a result.
We lost you, Nova.
Yeah, Nova's stuck. Jill, do you want to jump in? I think you have some interesting silver linings to offer.
Definitely. I think I can talk to the environmental portion. So regenerative farming goes hand in hand with organic farming, which Janie's Farm is a certified organic farm. Janie's Mill is a certified organic mill. And the principles of organic farming focus on building the health of the soil and restoring its life-giving roles. So Janie's Farm is committed to regenerative practices, and that's talking mainly about crop rotation and cover cropping, which add nutrients to the soil. It sequesters carbon, it increases water absorption, it prevents soil erosion, it can suppress weeds, it can do other wonderful things like controlling insect pests or soil-borne diseases. So Janie's Farm, is just really dedicated to these sorts of practices, which of course are good for the environment. And then you may ask, well, how do these changes help the environment? So every day when we have customers purchase a bag of flour, that means more land is farmed organically using regenerative practices. And so that's without the use of agricultural chemicals, which many are known to be carcinogens. So we feel like here at Janie's Farm and at Janie's Mill that we're involved in restoring the life of the soil, as well as contributing to clean air and clean water. And at the same time, we're producing and providing healthy nutritional products. So just on the environmental side, I think customers are being educated as to why our products, our flours, our grains are so much better for them and for the environment. Is Nova back?
Yeah, I'm back. I'm just on audio for the moment, but I can hear you. Yeah, thank you very much for sharing that. Is there anything else that you'd like to mention, maybe Alyssa, about the the overall some of the beneficial impacts you're seeing through the Artisan Grain Collaborative?
I would just highlight what you noted a bit earlier of a resurgence or increased interest in local and regional food systems that folks are seeing throughout different types of food production, and it certainly has been true for folks working in grain, which is pretty exciting for us because I think on the whole, grain-based products have sort of been the last to people's plates in the farm to table movement. For a long time, there's been a lot of good work around fruit and vegetable sourcing and people thinking about where their meat and dairy products are coming from. And so I think grain, it makes up such a big part of so many of our diets historically and even still today. And so just having this opportunity, strange as an opportunity as it has been, we have tried to embrace it and just show the way that local and regional food systems are strong and resilient and flexible and are able to pivot quickly to meet needs and to feed our communities, which is what we've been working to do all along. This just gave us an extra platform on which to communicate that work.
Fantastic. Rebecca, would you like to add some of the impact that you've been creating at Badger?
Sure. Well, I would say that directly connected to the pandemic, being able to explore what it looks like to travel less, have remote workers, kind of that less of an impact on just putting carbon into the atmosphere through our travel has certainly been an interesting process. And I think that there's a lot that we can learn from that after this is over that will help us to reduce our impact. During this whole process, we've also been full steam ahead on putting solar panels on our business. So we have a 1,400 panel solar array. We have 30 workers who've been there throughout this whole process with good social distancing, installing panels so that we can be fully green energy operated manufacturing facility, which has been exciting. But I think the other thing, I don't know if that's directly connected to the pandemic, it was happening one way or the other, but the other thing that I am seeing that is directly connected is kind of this increase in collaboration, especially amongst mission-driven businesses. And so I think, Jill and Alyssa make a really great example of that, but and I'm sure Andy has as well, that it's just been a really incredible time where people are reaching out and saying, how can we work together to kind of get through this so that at the end of this, the businesses that survive are going to help rebuild an economy that is a really positive force. That's my hope.
So continuing and perhaps even pursuing a little more proactively some of the changes that you had already been implementing from a energy use and collaboration perspective. Okay, Andy, can you talk a little bit? I know when we had our call, there were a couple of impacts that really stood out for me. I know you mentioned you have had to furlough some employees, which is understandable as being in the retail business. But I'm wondering if you foresee the opportunity to rehire those employees and if there's, you've had your responsible coffee sourcing program for a long time and you've been able to maintain orders to those suppliers when a lot of other retail operations have shut down and canceled their orders.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the furlough because honestly, for us where we're at it as a company right now, it's a little hard to focus a lot on the silver linings, though. I see them and I will mention them, but it is very hard because not only did we have to furlough retail team members aggressively, as I mentioned, over 50% of our home office staff, marketing department furloughed, many, finance team, many furloughs, my own very small team furloughs, reduced hours. So it's really still candidly a very difficult time, and it's hard to be happy about that, especially because I'm one of the few who is still working full-time hours. So it feels very difficult to talk about what's great. when so many of our really talented, really committed team members are having to help the company take these cuts right now. So that's a very difficult part. I actually mentioned this before, but one of the things that I really, really do believe in is our responsible coffee supply chain. Always trying to do the right thing, how we set up our coffee supply chain, always improving it. One great thing I was super excited that we did this year was our first third-party verification of our supply chain. So a group it amounted to about 13% of our purchasing for this year has now gone through a third-party certification by a group called Veritas, and they went out and they have a very rigorous approach with like blind visits, satellites, in-person meetings, a whole very big approach, and they look at economic productivity and environmental impact at the farm level in our supply chain. And we proceeded with that work, and we got our very first report out from that work, and it's super exciting. It's super engaging. I was almost nervous to suggest to our C team that I had results to present from this because it was work that was launched prior, but there was just a very warm reception. They were really interested and excited to see these results. My CEO has tasked me with getting back to what are we doing with this information? How are we going to, make it, contribute to improvement, shore up our supply chain, be part of right good work. So that's very positive for me. And so that leads to another positive, even in this kind of, we're not quite in the silver lining phase, to me, is I have always felt like I wanted us to pursue more revenue stream. I want us to sell more coffee. The more coffee that we sell, the more impact we can have at the farm level through the purchasing choices we make, through our commitment to a group called Food for Farmers, which helps with cyclical hunger, which is a long-standing issue for coffee farmers and probably a lot of other agricultural workers as well. And the more coffee we can sell, the more we can increase work and programmatic work through Food for Farmers. So I'm excited that we're now opening, as Rebecca said, just opening our minds to like what was kind of the heart. No, we're retail, we're all about this, which is great. And it's created a very loyal following for Phil's that I'm delighted to be a part of. And then a part of me is like, but what's wrong with also selling, well-sourced, fantastic, delicious coffee through other channels to reach more people, to move more product that coffee farmers want to sell at good, fair pricing and good conditions. So that is the silver lining, is just an openness to moving more product in different ways, which I think is super exciting.
Yeah, and that's only possible because you've managed to stay open through all of these adaptations and innovation you've made.
And that's all credit to our C team. Like I was not in the group. I want to be very candid that, came up with the strategy for contactless stores, for executed on the strategy. There's a lot of core people who did that. And I'm personally really grateful for them because that has allowed us to keep buying coffee, as you said, make sure we still are paying our import partners who are then paying our producer partners, though with a lot of extended terms. We're very grateful for that, but we are able to keep executing and buying coffee, which is important.
Well, I want to thank you all for your commitment and your innovative problem solving during this time. And through listening to your stories and many others that I've been researching over the past few weeks, I pulled together a few key learnings. Ryan, since I'm not able to have webcam, I'm hoping you can just pull up that slide, because the intent here was to inspire, but also to share some key learnings. And there were so many that I took away today, but these are some of the fundamentals that I think will help companies weather this storm and come out stronger and more resilient to face the future. We also have an opportunity for some questions. Ryan, I'm going to let you manage that if there are any questions that were chatted in. And of course, all of us will be available to answer questions by email later as well.
Yeah, we have a few questions that came in. A few are grain and milling specific. So Jill and Alyssa, I think I'll follow up with you afterwards to answer some of those specific questions in a one-on-one setting. And Nova, we have another question about some specific practices for opening and keeping employees and customers safe, which I think you will touch on a bit on this slide as part of opportunities for NSF to support companies as they are weathering the COVID.
Oh, yeah. We'll be happy to follow up with you. NSF has been offering several webinars to all different organizations. We just did one with the Specialty Foods Association, and we have a team of experts who are available to talk, to guide and discuss with you all of the options for your reopen, or as the case may be, your stay open strategy in terms of employee health and safety. Andy and Rebecca both alluded to this inside of their companies, staggering shifts, managing employees so that they can, their sort of contact can be traced, and setting up manufacturing in a way that protects them first and foremost. So we have an expert team who can advise you on that, and we can follow up with you in an email about that. And then for others who are also interested in building more resilience in your business and tapping into some resources, NSF is here to support you in all of the ways that you can see on this slide. We're offering some training right now. We act as an outsourced, staff for projects that perhaps are not on your priority list because you're just trying to meet demand or keep the business open. And we work a lot on supply chain risk management and resilience. So feel free to reach out to us. But I hope that this webinar was inspiring and that you also learned some tips and tactics by listening to our panelists who have been so generous with sharing their time right now, especially as busy as they are. We've heard about very significant growth in demand in certain areas of their companies, and they're managing to stay open and continue to serve us all, which is admirable. And I hope that we have some takeaways that help us all build more resilient and responsible businesses for the future. That is the opportunity that has been emerging out of all of the difficulty and stress that this pandemic has caused. And I hope that we all do our best to take that opportunity. And thank you for joining us today. I think we'll be doing another webinar soon, so be on the lookout.